Next up, we have Henk Ludik, who's a non-exec chairman of Suvo. Suvo is a ASX-listed mining minerals company. He is here to present on kaolin and metakaolin and what Suvo have in store for the future of potential collaborations within the industry. Henk is a mining engineer. He has a career spanning over 20 years and is an expert in engineering feasibilities, mine optimization, ESG, and corporate finance. Henk has worked at a number of landmark transactions in the resource sector since 2006 and holds a Bachelor of Engineering in Mining and Engineering, a Master's in Science in Oil and Gas Engineering, and an MBA. Please welcome Henk.
Are we good to go? Thanks, Peter. That's quite the introduction. I'm sure the technology will follow at some stage. Let's F5 it. Oh, there we go. Yep. I just want to go back to that one. Peter omitted to mention I'm also the guy who can come up with the longest possible titles for the graveyard shift right at the end on a school night. It's a title I'm proud of, worked hard on it. I believe everybody's had time to read the disclaimer, so I'll just jump into it. I'm certainly not here to tell you anything about cement or metakaolin. I think Tong's done a fantastic job in positioning the application in the market and the potential opportunity. What I'm here to tell you about is the role that somebody like a Suvo could potentially play in the sector and why we see ourselves as a partner of choice within the Australian market. We are a listed ASX small cap. We see ourselves as a contemporary emerging small cap. A couple of reasons for that: focused on a dual commodity portfolio. We've got an operating asset in Victoria, an operation we bought from Emery's in 2021. That's been running for about 50 years. And in WA, we have a number of operations, 2 silica sand assets, which I won't be touching on during this presentation, and then a kaolin project close to Gabon, which we are in pre-feasibility studies with. So it's quite an interesting portfolio. And given the status of the portfolio, we have started looking at the downstream markets. Now, the reason we started doing that is, as Peter's outlined, I've got a background in ESG. I'm quite passionate about the subject matter. Being raised a mining engineer, I realised the overlap between social sustainability, governance, procedures, processes, and responsibilities with engineering, and the overlap there creates an opportunity, but also a responsibility for us to look after our environment, our limited resources, and obviously the industries that we deliver those commodities into. We have a clear growth path and strategy. As I mentioned, we are based in Victoria with a live operation. It's been running. We have a live book of about 27 off-takers. We produce about 18 or so different products into a number of household names, including the likes of Dulux, Emery's, Visi, and others. So we know how to run the operations, we know how to produce the commodity, and we are quite excited to be venturing down this new road, which is green cement. Given that we are a company based in Australia, we also give our partners and our off-takers the opportunity to partner with a local entity. We don't have the same issues from a supply chain perspective, and we offer our clients, given that we're based on both seaboards, the opportunity to potentially minimise the logistic issues around securing these commodities. I thought this is one that I'll probably be slaughtered for the cement seminar, but as you're probably well aware of the fact that cement is one of the largest contributors of CO2 emissions per annum out there. It's the equivalent of the emissions from the global car fleet. So if we manage as an industry to address this, Elon Musk will probably end up eating my hat. This has been touched on tonight already, so I won't labour on the point, but the bulk of the emissions are generated during the The clinker conversion, you are well familiar with that. The traditional calcination technologies relies on the burning of fossil fuels, so that's probably another 30 or so percent of emissions. Transport and grinding is the last 13 or so percent. Now, mining is an interesting one. Limestone's quite a hard material, as you would be well aware of. So it's a commodity which is drilled and blasted, and hence it's quite opportune for us to say that kaolin you don't have to blast. It's a very straightforward, very simple process to mine kaolin. But I'll get to that in greater detail later. Now, once again, when you follow one of the top 2 researchers in the world on a pozzolanic presentation, you certainly don't want to linger on things like why metakaolin's a good idea. I think everything that I'm about to say has been said a couple of times tonight. But I think it's important to mention that metakaolin's been used since 1962. The Jupiter Dam in Brazil was the first large-scale construction using metakaolin. Happy to report back tonight that it's still running. It generates about 1.6 gigawatt of energy. It's a great asset, and I attribute some of that to the fact that they've used metakaolin. Not singing my own praises or anything, because I wasn't involved in that one specifically, but just an overview. Metakaolin's produced via the calcination hydroxylation of kaolin clays, anywhere between 500 to 900 degrees Celsius. We've touched on the fact that that this CSH gel is formed, which impacts the density of the material, as well as reducing the porosity. And the impact is, well, we'll get to the benefits of HRMs on the next slide, but once again, I think they've been well discussed tonight, so we probably don't have to linger on them too much. But you will typically rely on applying a HRM in your cement mixture. And typically you'll look for an alumina, silica, and iron oxide content of greater than 90%. We recently completed some test work with the likes of FL Schmidt. We had a publication out in market about a month ago, where we found that our kaolin from the Gabon deposit had a content of about 97.8%, which is quite encouraging. In order to be classified as a class N pozzolanic in the US specifically, you typically hit that 90% threshold, and what we've seen from our deposit at the moment in Gabon is that we achieve that fairly easily. And the exciting part of all of this is there's no commercial scale HRM production in Australia at the moment. And for an emerging producer, we're quite excited about the numbers, both the size of the market and the estimated size of the market by 2027, about $56 billion US, and we see double-digit CAGR numbers, which is always encouraging for a producer. I think Tom's touched on most of this, so I won't say too much about it, other than metakaolin adds pretty much everything that you need to a carbon-friendly, low-carbon cement, from early age strength that allows you to be more productive on your sites because of the earlier removal of formwork. Obviously, you potentially address the issues which result in your concrete cancers, which is exactly what you want in these high-risk infrastructure pieces, such as dams. And then the exciting part in this mix, from an ESG perspective, is the fact that you can cut your CO2 emissions by up to 40%. Depending on how you address this issue. Now, I'm certainly not here to tell you anything about metakaolin, because you've seen the experts talk tonight, including going back to the soccer days, which I found quite interesting. We are more here to talk about our process and our approach to market. We certainly don't consider ourselves to be the smartest guys in the room by any stretch of the imagination, and maybe by using this many pictures, I illustrate that. But we want to showcase that we are following a very concise process in how we approach this opportunity set in the market. We're quite good as mining engineers to break things, so we can actually mine the raw materials and we can produce that. We've been producing that for close to 50 years. And it's pretty much when we got to this metakaolin research stage where we sat across the table from each other and realized that we need smarter people in the room. And we were fortunate to wheel in the likes of Curtin, FL Schmidt, and more recently Calyx to help us with the testing of that material. Now, the next interesting step for a producer of metakaolin would be to develop the product to actually go into the green cement economy. But once again, we have to face the constraints which industry face on a day-to-day basis in terms of how we commercialize all of this. So we're not creating any hype. We're quite careful to follow a proper process to produce a commodity which we think's got a firm spot in the emerging economy. So step one, raw material production. That's Betong operations in Victoria over there. The only hydrous kaolin operation in Australia. Hydrous just implies that you've got a wet section in your plant where you wash all the nasties, including salts, out of your kaolin. We've got 3 satellite deposits feeding into a central plant. We have as I said, we've been operating this mine for over 50 years. And we've got a JORC indicated resource for multiple decades at these different resources. So we certainly are there for the foreseeable future. And hence we're spending capital to upgrade our processing capacity from about 27,000 tonne per annum to 60,000 tonne per annum, with commissioning planned for Q1 2023. And the capacity upgrade, we believe, is aligned to the demand of the market. We're certainly not creating a commodity to push into the market. That's always a very risky strategy when you do develop these assets. Over here, you see our Gabon deposit. Our resource is pretty much that little orange spot down there. The interesting fact about Gabon is we have a hole on that property that we refer to as Macol 1, some of the highest grade kaolin that's been reported in any study. Which is quite interesting. Once again, multi-decade resource that's been delineated with opportunities to extend well beyond that. And the fantastic opportunity around all of these assets are the fact that they are close to infrastructure and they are in a jurisdiction where you can be certain that there won't be disruptions, unlike what you see in the Ukraine at the moment, who is also a meaningful producer of kaolin. Back to the pictures, because it's mining engineer talking. But as you can see, we've done the work on the projects. At Gabon, we have completed the calcination and the testing of the product. We are in the process of receiving those samples back from FL Schmidt, and we are quite interested to talk to various parties in terms of proceeding to this R&D piece. We look forward to working with the likes of Curtin University and others to understand exactly what the opportunity set around the product is. We are quite keen to engage with industry partners to understand what their constraints are, because obviously the infrastructure is quite aged in Australia. So they face that capital constraint, but at the same time, we've got a multi-decade resource on the other side, so there could be opportunities for JVs or partnerships around that. And then industry partners from an international perspective are also of interest to us, and we've been in contact with a number of names in that space, a number of partners who are quite progressive in their thinking in terms of the application of metakaolin as a pozzolanic, and have been doing so for multiple decades. Betong operations, we've started with the test work with Calyx, so the samples are on their way to the Bacchus Marsh operation, based also in Victoria, just down the road from our current facilities, and we hope to get those results back in Q3 this year. So it's very exciting for us. Once again, you can see, we followed due process. We are partnering with the right names in industry, and hopefully we can partner with more names to address the potential issues in industry. The last reason we think that we are potentially a good fit for market is, and this was touched on earlier as well, is the emissions from the cement industry. The grinding and transport, the actual calcination component, the burning of fuels, the drilling, blasting and hauling. We think we've got a value proposition for each of those to potentially reduce your carbon emissions. As I mentioned, our mining process is quite low impact, so it's effectively just scraping clays and putting that into a plant where there's no nasties in our process. It's a straightforward wet-dry circuit with dryers at the end. We are talking to the likes of a Calyx to potentially evaluate the electrified calcining units, which will allow us to hook that up to a grid. Once again, our Betong operations are situated right next to a wind farm, which is a great opportunity for us. In the calcination itself, rather than no emissions, I would say low emissions. Obviously, it depends on your final product mix, and we've heard quite a bit about that tonight. And then the fact that from a transport perspective, we are based on both the west and the east coast provides local producers with an opportunity to cut that down as well. So from a Scope 3 emission perspective, it's quite an interesting value proposition, I would say, overall. And that's really the end of it. It's a school night, so I'm going to leave you with that, and thank you for the opportunity.